Afternoon. How we doing? I'm going to try and catch you before your food coma sets in. It's, can you guys hear me in the back? Or do you need me on a mic? No? Okay. So, Studiothink, we're downtown in the Galleria. Remember that place? Yeah, we're in an old retail space on the second floor. So come and visit anytime. But what are we? Why do we exist? Studiothink is a brand management and culture development firm. And the next question we usually get when we share that is, what does that mean and what do they have to do with each other? And for us, they have everything to do with each other, and that's kind of why we put them together. Brand management is about the engagement of the marketplace, of the community, of the public in a brand, and what you offer in that brand, whether it be a city, whether it be a hospital system, whether it be a bank, etc. Culture is really about the engagement of employees in that brand promise to that marketplace, right? So either way, when we're talking about brand or when we're talking about culture, we're talking about engagement, right? Make sense? That's kind of why we did it. So a couple things I wanted to share with you today. Before we dive into our take on what makes up high-performing teams, high-performing leaders, and high-performing cultures, I need you guys to reflect back for a second. Think back to a team that you were on, whether you were leading that team or whether you were being led. Think back to a leadership experience you've had, whether you were being led or whether you were the leader, where great things happened. I don't care if it's high school sports, I don't care if it's an academic team, I don't care if it's something in college, I don't care if it's your team right now. What made those people inspiring to be around? What made those accomplishments possible? We're going to dive into something we call appreciative inquiry today, and that's what I'm asking you to really do right now, is to inquire into the positive, into the appreciative. A lot of times we spend our energy focusing on solving problems, when in front of us there's a lot of great things that have happened that we can learn from and glean information from. So today is a practice of appreciative inquiry. So how many of you have been a part of a great team that's had a great accomplishment? Raise your hand. What was it?
Why were we?
What was the team?
It was a committee.
What did you do? Come on. What did you do?
It was called Women in Business for the Chamber.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Excellent. People agree?
Yes.
Excellent. Anybody else? Who's been a part of a great team? Yep. What'd you accomplish?
We had a great summer festival last year in City Northern Heights.
Excellent. Who else? Yep.
I was once president of an organization when I worked for AT&T called Alliance, and we used to adopt families at Christmas time, like 3 or 4, and shower them with a special Christmas for the kids.
Excellent. Yeah, amazing things are happening all over us. And it's easy to get caught in the minutia of the status quo or the mediocre. But in our heart of hearts, here's what we believe at Studiothink. We believe everybody wants to be a part of something great. Everybody wants to be a part of a team that's making a difference. They just need to be led in that area. So what we've done is we put together what we call a CultureShoc program. And it's shock in a good way. I should tie in a CultureShoc calendar, what do you call it? Shock collar, yeah. But I want to share with you our 7 cornerstones of CultureShoc. And we've got a worksheet for anyone that wants it. Take some notes if you want to. But here's what we've learned. And I want to make that really clear. We are not experts on culture. We're students of it. We study it in every organization we work with. We don't care if they're a Fortune 100 or if they're a startup. But what we've learned about high-performing cultures is that they're made up of high-performing teams, and those teams are led by high-performing leaders. So it goes down to the individual level. So I don't care right now if you're managing other people. Leading other people, not managing. You might be an individual contributor in your role right now. That's okay. Leaders are everywhere in organizations. But let's not limit our ability to influence and make change and do great things by whether or not we have a title. So we don't need to be formal leaders for this to be relevant. All we need to do is want to be a part of something great, a great team, a great community, etc. So, with that said, let's talk a little bit about why we exist. We really exist for this. You can't see it, but here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what it says. Only about 30% of the U.S. employees surveyed by Gallup are actually actively engaged in their work. 1/3 of the employees. 18% are actively disengaged or causing harm in that culture or that environment. Disengaged. Actively disengaged. The greatest organizations from a culture perspective, for-profit, non-profit, etc., are organizations that have high levels of engagement. And those organizations, a lot of people put culture in this bucket of, hey, it's soft, feel good, kumbaya, let's hug it out type environment. That's not true. From our we're the least kumbaya culture people you've ever met. It's about high-performing organizations with accountability and with trust and respect, etc. But we're not about that touchy-feely stuff. That fits some cultures, but not all, and that's okay. But let's not look at culture in any organization as something that's, oh, it's a nice to have. It's actually a requirement to live a brand promise to your communities, to your clients, etc. And it produces real financial benefits and hard bottom line benefits for organizations. We're going to show you how. So, couple things. Here's what we've learned about organizations. Everyone is interested in being a part of a high-performing team, high-performing culture, and everyone wants to be a great leader. Are they committed to it, or are they just interested in it? That saying about in the morning when you're eating breakfast, the chicken is interested in that breakfast you're eating. The pig is committed to that breakfast that you're eating. You get what I'm saying? So what's the difference for us? The difference is committed is I'm going to do this no matter what. When it's easy, when it's hard, when I don't want to do this, I'm committed. I'm all in. Nothing's going to change my focus. When I'm interested, I do it when it's convenient for me. I do it when it's easy, and I do it when we're not busy. That makes sense? So here's what we've seen in organizations. We've actually seen, we put this on a little graph here for you. On the bottom is a time continuum, and on the left is return on investment, return on energy. When we're looking at return on investment and return on energy, anytime an organization tries to make an impact in their culture, or in an organization, they try to, even in their community, they try to make a change. So they start here, right? Start at the beginning. And it requires a little bit of investment. Money, time, energy, etc. And what happens is, we put all this time, energy into money, and it gets worse before it gets better. And this gap here is about 6 to 8 months. 6 to 9 months, maybe. And we get back to the point where we're just where we are when we first started. And we're like, oh man, that was a lot of work, and we got nowhere. We're exactly where we started. That didn't work. Let's start again. Okay, let's buy a new book, Who Moved My Cheese? Let's give it to all of our employees. We're all going to read Who Moved My Cheese. This is kind of management by bestseller, right? Let's put a new book in front of them. We're all going to study this book. Guess what happens again? 6, 9 months down the road, right back where we started. Let's try that one more time. Let's bring in a consultant. Let's bring in Studiothink. Here we go. No, that's not. We don't do that. But that's what great organizations, any organization that's trying to be great, it's filled with great intentions. They want to get there. What we've realized is that the language around high-performing teams and leaders and organizations, it only changes so people can sell more books. The cornerstones are there regardless. They don't change. And great organizations that really do make changes in their organization stick with something. And you got to stick with it through that pain. It looks in most of our engagements, we're engaged with a client for about 24 to 36 months in most cases. Our goal is for them to be completely self-sufficient when we're done with them. We don't want to justify fees and justify their need on us. We don't want to create dependencies. If we have, we failed. But that's what great organizations do. They stick with it. And that's when you get your returns. That's when you make an impact. That's when you make a difference. And guess what? Even at the top there, we're going to start to dip again. And we're going to hear in an organization, oh, here we go again. But if we just need to do a refresh there because we're on to something that's working. So think about it. In great teams, the great teams you've been a part of, you guys were committed. You weren't just interested in things. Great leaders are committed. They're not just interested in being great leaders, even when it's hard. So we created CultureShoc. The idea here is that we're actually creating organizations that are 3 times more profitable per employee than the competition. You can disseminate that into other what we call key performance indicators. We're higher customer satisfaction ratings, higher employee satisfaction ratings, etc. We measure a lot of KPIs. Most of our clients are for-profit. Most of them like to measure profit per employee as a KPI. So that's what we've been able to show with culture and CultureShoc, is that they're 3 times more profitable when you're a high-performing culture. We haven't changed anything except how we approach culture. And a lot of these things that we're actually going to talk about today, they're not expensive to do. In fact, you can do most of them on your own, if not all of them. So I'm going to walk down this path here of 7 cornerstones. So let's start with the first one. Any questions so far before I dig in? Okay? All right, here we go. Emotional engagement trumps intellectual every time. And when we say this, I've got an elephant up here walking down this path. Here's the reason. If anyone's ever read the book Switch, the subtitle is Change When Change is Hard. They use the analogy of an elephant with a rider on top. The rider represents your intellect and what we know is right, what we know works, etc., etc. Eat less, lose weight, don't smoke, it's bad for you, blah, blah, blah. Intellectually, we know what's right and what we need to be doing. The elephant represents our emotions. And when the intellect and those emotions are in line, that elephant's going to walk down the path that rider wants it to go. When those emotions decide that they're not in line anymore, or not engaged, that elephant's going to go wherever it wants to go. Our job as leaders, regardless of role, is to carve out a path that's so attractive for the elephants, the emotions of the people that we're leading, to walk down that path and nothing else be attractive to them. Nothing but great things be attractive. How do we do that? In the greatest organizations, we see 3 things that come to life as a motivator, as an emotional engager of people. And that is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And a lot of times we'll first meet with an organization and we'll do one-on-one interviews with random staff members. And I ask them, hey, what do we need to be doing in order to better engage you? And what do you think the first thing we hear is? Pay me more money. Right? Give me a raise. Well, guess what? I can give them that raise. Their engagement's not going to move an inch, to be honest with you. Studies have shown this. What moves emotional engagement is autonomy. The ability for someone to feel like they can make a difference, that they can make decisions, that they can act with authority, not over other people, that they can act with confidence, that they're not a drone. They're not expected to strictly take orders. They're expected to think and to be creative and innovate, etc. Mastery. People love the idea of being a master at something. You know, if the book Outliers talks about 10,000 hours it takes to master something. Violin, speaking, whatever it is. Put your 10,000 hours in and allow that person to develop mastery of something. And then purpose. You know, it used to be, back in the 50s, even 60s, that when someone had a career, that was pretty much their identity, if you think about it. Think Mad Men, you know, the series Mad Men. But now, the younger generation's purpose is outside of work. Work is ancillary. And if we want to engage the next generation of leaders, we've got to engage their purpose. How do we let them live their purpose inside the four walls of our organizations and outside in their personal lives? And how do we interconnect those? So, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It's not about money. It's not about a title. It's about those three things. And study after study shows us that we can actually pay someone more money to do a complicated task, and they'll actually be worse at it if I give them more money. If it's different from mundane tasks, like put this here, put this here. But anything that requires logic and thinking, actually the more reward we give them from a financial standpoint, the worse they do, because it's really about those three. It's not about the money piece. It's fascinating. But in our organizations, a lot of times we can be a little archaic in how we approach engagement. So that's one. Two is positive accountability. And most people, when I say this, they're like, whatever. That doesn't work. Accountability is, I got my thumb on you, here's what you're going to do, here's what I told you you're going to do, etc. For us, accountability is a gift. Accountability is the highest form of service you can provide another human being. Think about it this way, if you and I spoke about what you need to be doing for you to be great, and we detailed that out and jointly created that, and I didn't hold you accountable to that, I'm doing you a disservice as a person. You're not growing as a result of that experience. Yet, in organizations, we're uncomfortable with accountability. In families, we're uncomfortable with accountability. I actually have a client that's a third-generation business owner. His grandfather started the business. They're about a $20 million distribution company. And he came to us and he said, you know what? I've got a family business and my family is dysfunctional. I don't want a family business anymore. I want a team. And he really had to get comfortable with accountability as a gift and not something viewed as a negative or a four-letter word in an organization. So, that's a mindset shift for us when we look at accountability as a gift. Most of us don't. But when we deal with it on the front end and it's co-created and it's something that we're both passionate about and we ask permission, do you want me to help you with this? Do you want to be held accountable to this? And they say yes. They're giving you, they're craving that leadership and that camaraderie with you around those issues. So we set up systems of positive accountability in organizations. How many of you have children? Okay, think back to, some might be older or younger, but think back to when they were 4 or 5 years old. If they're in that range now, great. What is the one thing they do better than anybody? Ask questions. Why? 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 Right? When we really want to dig into an organization, what's working and what's not working, if we can just be great at asking questions. We are great at asking what went wrong and who's to blame for that and how do we fix it. But how do we ask those questions of what went right? Why did that go so well? How do we make that happen again? Who's responsible for that? How do we engage them in another part of our organization? Think about the last time you had an emergency meeting because something went so well. We don't do that. But imagine how engaging that conversation would be for people in your team if you say, hey, we knocked that one out of the park. How did that happen? Why did it happen? How do we do it again? How can we apply it to another opportunity? Those are engaging conversations. When we get into the conversations of what went wrong and whose fault is that, people clam up, they disengage, they stop talking, they stop sharing, etc. Think about what you reinforce is what's going to reoccur in your organizations. And again, you don't have to be a formal leader to do this. Catch someone doing something right in your organization, acknowledge them and say, hey, how do we get more of this? Appreciative inquiry is actually founded at Case Western Reserve. Fascinating concept. And we're not coming in here and saying, you know what, I would just need you guys to pretend everything's unicorns and rainbows and it's just beautiful outside and it's not 3 degrees and everything's gorgeous, there's no problem in the world. We're not saying that. We're saying spend some more purposeful time and energy focused on the positive. It just makes less room for the negativity in an organization. So, why did that go so well? That's appreciative inquiry. And it's very much engaging. You want to talk about creating autonomy in an organization? If I ask someone for their opinion, that's autonomy. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm asking questions. How do we do this better? Etc. 4 is grassroots ownership. The greatest organizations we've studied and have been a part of, the culture is reinforced from the top, but it's owned from the bottom up. And when we talk about grassroots ownership, we formally create what we call culture champion programs. So think about the people in your organizations that are high performers. They're certainly not leaders they're probably not leaders by title in most cases, because we don't want formal leadership to kind of cloud this. But non-formal leaders, they live the values of your organization, they're a positive influence, and they have the ability to influence peers. So we actually go and create a profile in an organization and we find those culture champions. You know what we do? We ask them, how do we get more of you? We ask them, what's going well and how do we get more of it? We engage them in appreciative inquiry. We create opportunities for them to be leaders among peers. We give them an additional skill set around how do you change the tone of the conversation at the water cooler. And it's very much grassroots owned. And then you know what we do as leaders? Get out of the way. Get out of the way. The best leaders we've come across are those really humble leaders that are comfortable with getting feedback from anybody in their organization, regardless of role. Make sense? Yep. Any questions so far? We good? Helpful? Ready to fall asleep? No. Okay. Next, leaders grow leaders. When we talk about leaders, not managers here, that's really what we're looking for. We are looking for opportunities for people to grow. And it's a simple litmus test that we go through with every leader. We'll sit and observe what we call coaching sessions between a leader and an employee. We'll do secret shopper type stuff where we'll kind of be in an organization, they think we're an intern, and we can kind of see how people are interacting in an organization. Guess what? When an employee goes to a manager or a leader and says, hey, I've got a problem with this, and that leader, thinking that they're helping, takes it off their shoulders and handles it for them, what have they just done? That person didn't grow at all. They took this monkey off their back, they gave it to you, and they walked away. Think about it that way for a second. What if it were as simple as a monkey? Put this monkey on your back. Hey, you deal with this issue now. That's not fair, right? Think about the return on energy the leaders in an organization are getting. My return on energy goes down when everyone comes in my office and throws their monkeys at me, and I'm walking around with, a circus, right? Think about that for a second. If I had an interaction with an employee and they didn't leave that interaction more self-managed and more capable themselves, versus just as dependent on me, then I failed in that interaction with that person as a leader. Think about it for your children. If your children bring issues to you and you just solve them for them, are they growing as people? I've got 2 kids. I want to raise self-sufficient, self-confident, self-reliant, happy kids. I think we all want that, right? And I want them off my payroll eventually. But if you think about it, the same thing we want for our kids is the same thing we should want for our team members, our peers, each other, the people that we're leading. That's what I want for our people. And so how do we create an environment where, A, it's safe to come to me for issues, but also know that when you bring that monkey to the table, you're leaving with it too. We're just going to talk about great ideas and how you might be able to address that. And then we're going to set up some positive accountability on what you're going to do about it by when and who's going to own that. And then we're going to follow up on that. Go figure. Crazy stuff, right? It's not rocket science what these great organizations are doing. Yes?
Okay, you have there leaders grow leaders, but naysayers act leaders.
Oh, big time.
Can you address that?
Big time. So our version of that is knowers versus learners. Okay, so if I'm a knower as a leader, for instance, knowers for me, they already know what I'm going to say before I sit down. They already know what the solution is. They cut me off. They're not interested in other opinions. They're limited in their ability to grow because they know what they know, right? Learners ask the questions. Learners ask why 5, 6 times. Learners are, why do you, tell me more about that. What do you think we should do? So if someone sits down and talks to me, is that naysayer to me, I'm dealing with a knower. So to your point, naysayers act leaders, or naysayers don't create leaders, completely agree. If you think about it for a second, where do you spend the majority of your time? Are you in learner mode or are you in knower mode? Let's be honest. I already know, I just got a voicemail from so-and-so. I know what this is about. I got the, my tone is already set. I'm already prepared for the fight that's going to come, etc. If I approach that conversation from an appreciative inquiry standpoint, was focused on asking questions, was really engaged emotionally in growing that person, I might come out with it, have a different outcome in that environment. Make sense? So knowers versus learners. You got to be the change that you want to see. So if I've got an organization of knowers, we'll get a lot of questions. In fact, we were with a client right now, a newer client on the east side, and man, they've got a lot of knowers in that organization, right? Yeah. And every time we would sit down with an individual, we would ask, hey, how are you doing with accountability yourself inside the organization? Scale of 1 to 10. Okay, they'd give us a score. Then we'd say, hey, how's the rest of the organization doing with accountability, scale of 1 to 10? Wouldn't you know that every individual was higher than the rest of the company? So if that's true, actually it's impossible for it to be true. But every time they point their fingers at someone else from an accountability standpoint, they're 3 pointing right back at them, right? So that's really what the focus is. Are you really in learner mode when you're pointing outside for fixes, when you could really be looking at yourself and saying, how can I handle that better? How have I handled a difficult situation before, handled it well, and how can I apply that here? So that's what we mean by leaders grow leaders. Does that make sense? Any other questions there? Yeah.
You think the biggest impediment to that is that some leaders don't want to impart knowledge to other people because it's a fear that, gee, if they become better than me, particularly in middle management, they're going to take my job. It's a self-preservation thing?
Yeah, great question. If you didn't hear it, do some leaders fear sharing information because they're worried about self-preservation? They might make themselves obsolete, right? You know, what's real funny is that what we're seeing in the new age of the economy and the new organizations out there and the ones that are thriving versus the ones that are dying is if you're not willing to share information and do it rapidly, the organization's not going to be there long term anyways. So you better get on the bus of being a collaborative team member or it's not going to work. Data just moves too fast now. People have too much access to information. When I first started, before I started Corporate Quest, we would implement these really large ERP systems. And these software systems ran entire businesses. And what we found was the sales guy wanted this guy way, and the finance guy wanted it this way, and the warehouse guy wanted it this way. And none of them were willing to share what they were doing in their silo with anyone else on those teams. And those were the implementations that were the most failed for that organization. What we found in organizations is that we did this really cool test in one company. We gave everyone instant cameras. You know, this is even before people were snapping pictures with cell phones. We said, go out on your shop floor and I want you to take pictures of the people that help you the most. We come back, we look at the pictures, wouldn't you know? There's all our culture champions that they took pictures of. Those people that are willing to share knowledge, that are willing to help, those are the people that are going to be elevated in an organization. And the smart leaders are comfortable with growing other people. I've done my job when I've worked my way out of a job. That means I get to elevate. And then I can pull that person with me. But too often our ego gets in the way. One of the things we talk about in organizations is staying above the line versus below the line. We'll go into an organization and we'll say, hey, what are the actions, mindsets, and phrases you want to hear, see, and feel in your organization that you want to reinforce? And they come up with their own list, and we whittle it down. And then what's below the line? What do you not want to see, hear, feel? What do you not want to be a part of this organization 6 months from now? And we put it below the line. And then we ask everyone in that room, regardless of role, are you comfortable with being held accountable to this? Yes. Great. Are you now comfortable with holding other people accountable to this? Well, that's a different story. When organizations get comfortable with accountability, it happens in 3 levels. First, they get comfortable from the top down. Then they get comfortable with it peer-to-peer. And the greatest organizations are comfortable with accountability from the bottom up. So regardless of role, I can hold you accountable to being above the line, even if you're the CEO of the organization and I'm a janitor. Doesn't matter. That's what happens in the greatest organizations. Make sense? 6, tribal stories. And if you think about tribal stories, you think about what lives on generation to generation, right? For us, tribal stories are, what are those value-based experiences that people have gone above and beyond that are in line with the values of your organization that you want to celebrate. And this is us catching people doing things that are right. This is us being focused on appreciative inquiry, finding people doing things that are great and celebrating that. And what we mean by tribal stories is that if you think about it, stories are gold. Stories are the things that engage people emotionally. Not the data. It's not the data around why we should make this decision versus this decision. Tell me about a story. I'll give you an example. One of the companies that we actually talked to several times down in Charlotte is Nucor Steel. It's a steel company. How exciting is that, right? Guess what? They're known for their culture worldwide. Why is that? They are a global steel company, publicly traded. There's only 4 layers between the guy on the shop floor and the CEO of that organization. They purposely drive every decision as far down in that organization as possible because they trust people. They expect them to be thinkers. They're trying to create autonomy, mastery, purpose. I asked them, how do you enforce the values of your organization? He said, well, Ron, one of our values is integrity. And we don't just throw it up on a wall and write integrity up there and try to wordsmith something after it. We tell stories about it. We tell our tribal stories about it. And one of his tribal stories was they had a 10-year employee that was in a part of the factory that he wasn't allowed to be in without the right safety gear on. Nobody is. They're dealing with molten steel. And if you are, that is a fireable offense. And this employee found himself in that place. Nobody saw him. Nobody saw him. Yet he turned himself in. Said, you know what? I was here. I shouldn't have been. I didn't have this gear on. They chose not to fire. Not only did they not choose to fire that individual because he lived the values of that organization, but now that individual, when they bring on a new wave of employees, that individual comes and tells his tribal story around integrity. And so do 3 other people. So if you think about that, I'm more likely to remember that story than I am integrity with a little wordsmith sentence after that, right? So think about your organization, the tribal stories, those times when people have gone above and beyond, and how do you elevate those stories? How do you put them in writing? We have one organization, we work with several long-term care clients. They own chains of long-term care facilities. And what we've done is we've created a mechanism to capture tribal stories for every facility. They have 27 facilities. So basically, for every value, we have about 27 stories we can tell. At the end of the year, we publish what we call a chicken soup for the soul type book for that organization that they can now hand out to their community and say, you know what, this is what we stand for, and here are real stories we're bringing to life in this organization. So yeah, bring dad over here, bring mom over here. Here's what the experience is going to be like. Think about the tie-in between culture and brand right there. If I can tell people outside my organization, here's what we stand for, and here's stories that prove that, I've just increased my integrity, my authenticity in the marketplace for the people that we serve. Last but not least, measurement. People say culture is not possible to measure, it's too hard. It's intangible, it's soft, you can't really touch it, you can't see it. Totally disagree. In fact, we've created a mechanism to measure it. It's called our Culture Health Index. And if you look at something, if you're part of an organization that has a culture or an employee engagement survey, great. We say use it. Anything's better than nothing. But a couple things to think about. When we want to create autonomy, mastery, and purpose in people, when we ask for their feedback, that's creating that type of an environment. When we act on their feedback, that accelerates that type of an environment. So we actually, in every one of our clients, we ask every single person in their company to complete this once a quarter. Most organizations will do it once a year, if at all. And then we look at the report once during the year, and then, what should we do about that? Okay, let's do something about that. And then a year from now, we get another report, and guess what? We didn't improve anything. That doesn't work. For us, it doesn't work. If we can increase that feedback loop, we can be more proactive. We can be more purposeful about how we attack culture. We can look at it from a green, yellow, and red category. Where are your issues? Where are you doing great? Why is it going so well in those areas? How do we apply that to those red areas? We apply appreciative inquiry. If any of you guys are interested in measuring your culture, I think at the bottom of that sheet it says, shoot us an email tonight by midnight, culture@studiothink.net, that says that you're interested, and we'll get you a complimentary Culture Health Index for your facility. And we'll tell you where your culture health sits. And it's in 5 categories. Last but not least, just think about it from this perspective. It's this simple. Are you interested or are you committed to high performance? Everyone around you wants to be part of something great, and my guess is you do too, or you wouldn't be involved in an organization like this. If you're interested in it, It's easy. We do it when it's easy. If you're committed to it, we do it no matter what. And that is essentially your personal brand to the marketplace, your personal brand to your organization. So just as organizations have brands, you do as well as an individual. And you can take proactive management of your own brand. So, I know I went a little bit over. My apologies. But thank you for your time. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those right now.